On this edition of the Newsmakers, trumping the competition, we take a look at who the president-elect has in mind as he prepares to name his cabinet. Also on today's program, parked by the wayside, South Korean prosecutors prepare to question the president as protests against her grow. And in Picture This, the world's most powerful bromance. Social media users wonder how Obama and Biden are spending their last days in the White House. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. Donald Trump is a man seemingly hell-bent on challenging the established norms of America's political class. He's already broken protocol several times since winning the election, misdirecting the White House press pool to have a steak supper in New York and using Twitter rather than the traditional media to get his message across. But he's given little away so far. He's still working on his future cabinet with a steady stream of arrivals by appointment at Trump Towers every day. Our newsmaker today is this man, Donald Trump, as we ask who will get the top jobs in his new administration and what to make of those who already have a seat at the table.
Donald Trump is hiring, and the first thing he needs to prove to Americans is that he can choose the right staff, and that his experience in running companies will make him a better president. Trump has around 4,000 government positions to fill right after he takes control of the White House. He is searching for the best and the brightest. But little more than a week after winning the U.S. presidency, he is already having problems with the transition, as people across the nation continue to take to the streets in protest.
And let me tell you one other thing.
The first sign of trouble came last week when New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was dumped from his role as transition leader and replaced by Vice President-elect Mike Pence. Then, two senior officials in charge of handling national security issues were forced out. The former reality star said it was a move to drain the swamp of lobbyists, Washington insiders, and Republican Party veterans from his team, and sought to calm the fears of turmoil in a tweet.
Everybody's saying I should run for president. Let me ask you a question.
But he's also come under fire for treating the selection of his new administration like a contest.
Your campaign.
Donald Trump has appointed two men as top advisors in the White House, one with deep ties to the establishment and one who wants to smash it. The president-elect named Reince Priebus, the long-serving chairman of the Republican Party and a loyal advisor to his campaign, as his chief of staff, while Stephen Bannon, the head of Trump's campaign and of the right-wing website Breitbart, has been named chief strategist. His appointment is being blasted from all sides. Civil rights groups, Democrats, and some Republicans warn that Bannon will bring nationalist and racist views to the White House.
As long as a champion of racial division is a step away from the Oval Office, it will be impossible to take Trump's efforts to heal the nation seriously. So I say to Donald Trump, take responsibility.
Bannon's appointment isn't the only controversy. Trump is reportedly seeking top security clearance for his 3 adult children and son-in-law, who are already on his transition team, triggering alarm bells about nepotism. No matter who gets what job, one description seems to fit the makeup of the shortlist: unconventional. And it highlights the dilemma faced by Trump, who is now torn between a campaign promise to shake up Washington and a need to build a team with policy experience. Christine Pirovolakis, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Texas is John Gibson. He's a radio talk show host, and from Philadelphia, David Love. He's a political commentator and journalist. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. David Love, let's start with you. From those who have already been named, such as Bannon and Priebus, and from those names that have been floated about in terms of the future cabinet, what does that tell you about how President Donald Trump is set to govern?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I think that what we're looking at here is really a mixed bag. I mean, there's a combination of people who perhaps do not have allegiances to the president-elect, but there are also some very frightening picks that Trump has decided to go forward with. And I think really Steve Bannon, his selection as his top strategist and advisor, really is emblematic of the problems that we're going to face with the new Trump administration. Here is someone who is an avowed white supremacist, has said a number of offensive things, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, misogynist, you name it. And this really shows the direction, I believe, that the new president plans to go. This, I think, is really uncharted territory. To really normalize extremist people such as this gives a sense that this is what we're going to see. This is the new normal in American politics, and I think everyone should take pause.
Okay, John, so it's not just David Love who finds the likes of Bannon frightening. You even had Harry Reid, the outgoing Senate Minority Leader, saying, by placing a champion of white supremacists a step away from the Oval Office, what message does Trump send to the young girl who woke up Wednesday morning in Rhode Island, afraid to be a woman of color in America? Is there validity to these fears that people have when they look at Bannon's track record with Breitbart, and a bit deeper, that this guy might not be the type of person you want having the ear of the president?
Pardon me, but I think we've heard a load on this. I have looked at this closely. I do not know what our other guest is talking about exactly. Twitter, for instance, today canceled the accounts of 100 alt-right white supremacists in this country. 100. 60 million people voted for Donald Trump. The record of Steve Bannon being a white supremacist is almost non-existent. I literally don't know what this is, other than hysteria from the left about the fact that apparently working class, non-college educated white voters were instrumental in Donald Trump's election. I don't think there's any record of so-called white supremacy from either Trump or Steve Bannon or anybody in their administration.
David Love, this is hysteria from the left.
I don't know where to begin. The record is clear. Steve Bannon was in charge of Breitbart.com, which for a number of years has spooked. I was speaking.
Breitbart.com is
Bannon
not
okay, John, give David a chance. David, make your case.
Yes. Bannon's Breitbart.com has a long record of spewing racist invective, misogynist language, Islamophobic, you name it. But I think the larger issue is that the candidate, the president-elect, Donald Trump, throughout the course of this campaign, has made raw appeals to white supremacy, wanting to build a wall. Right now, as we speak, his advisors are putting together a plan to set up a Muslim registry. You know, he won based on the scapegoating of various marginalized groups. And now all of a sudden there is this move to try to normalize racism, normalize white supremacy. The Ku Klux Klan is planning a rally, a parade, to celebrate the triumph of Donald Trump. And now all of a sudden people are pretending as if none of this exists.
Okay, so
what we're witnessing is a very frightening, troubling chapter in our history.
Let's bring John in. John, any of that convince you?
Where do I begin? It's a load of crap. I mean, if the Ku Klux Klan were to endorse Donald Trump, that does not mean Donald Trump or his voters are Klan members. There are not 60 million Klan members in this country. If there's a few Klansmen around, bad on them. If the Black Panther Party were to endorse Hillary Clinton, that doesn't make Hillary Clinton an anti-white racist like the Black Panther Party. This stuff is just a smear campaign against Trump and his advisors to try to undermine them before they can take power. Look, A lot of white people in this country voted for Trump because they were tired of hearing from people like David that they don't matter anymore, that they should check their white privilege, that they should sit down and shut up. It doesn't make them racist that they were tired of hearing that in America.
Okay. David, I want to move on for a second, and I want to look at this kind of the broad spectrum of people who have been mentioned. I want to move on from Bannon, and let me give you some names here. John Bolton, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, Governor of New Jersey Chris Christie, Lieutenant General Flynn. We have South Carolina's Governor Nikki Haley. We have Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State. We have Sheriff David Clark, the sheriff of Milwaukee, who's African American. When you look at that medley of people, is there any pattern that you can discern?
Well, one of the outliers that you mentioned, Governor Nikki Haley, governor of South Carolina, that's an interesting pick because she's being considered for Secretary of State. And to my knowledge, we don't know her record. We don't know what she has done in the realm of foreign policy. So that's an interesting pick. As far as the others, once again, I'm concerned about some of the picks. I really am. Newt Gingrich, he represents the extremist wing of the party in many ways from the 1990s. Mayor Giuliani,
David, President Obama, sorry to interrupt you, David, because we are short of time. President Obama said, from saying that Trump was unfit to govern, he's now said, well, I don't think he's ideological, he's quite pragmatic. Is President Obama talking from conviction or just blind hope that he's going to hope Trump's going to be pragmatic? Or is he talking the truth? Does he truly believe that Trump is a pragmatist, that he's not a white supremacist racist, that he's a pragmatist?
Well, I don't know what's in his heart, but I would imagine that he's speaking from the standpoint of politics, also mindful that if he is perceived as trying to undermine the Trump administration, there would be a lot of blowback. I would have to believe that the president and other people surrounding him are very concerned about this presidency, but they won't say it right now because they have to have a smooth transition.
John, there was a Vanity Fair piece that came out a couple days ago. The headline was, Trump family mafia executes Stalin-esque purge. It was by Abigail Tracy. It said the transition effort has reportedly devolved into chaos with a miscellany of Trump loyalists, family members, lobbyists, and other fringe figures fighting for influence and purging dissenters. And it even says that a couple people were fired because Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, didn't like them. That sounds like Saddam Hussein's sons getting together a cabinet and not somebody who's going to be president of the United States. Do you believe any of that?
Well, I believe that interpretation of it is, once again, just hysterical. Look, Chris Christie was shoved off into the transition team because they weren't really sure there would be a transition. When they won, Mike Pence took over. He's the vice president. And Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, and by the way, Trump is going to make him some kind of top advisor, evidently, because he's going to get a security clearance. Jared Kushner is the son of a guy who was prosecuted by U.S. Attorney Chris Christie and sent to jail. So it should be no surprise that Jared Kushner doesn't want to see Chris Christie hanging around, and apparently Trump was tired of him too. This doesn't really mean chaos. And by the way, if I can remind David, nobody's been picked for anything. The press is reduced to watching the elevators at Trump Towers to see who's going up there. Today, Henry Kissinger is going up there. He's 90 years old. I doubt very seriously he's going to be appointed to anything, but he's going to see Trump. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. Nobody has been picked. Nikki Haley is being talked about. David's right. It's interesting. So Mike Flynn has been talked about as National Security Advisor. Newt Gingrich has been mentioned. Rudy Giuliani is mentioning himself. But nobody has been picked.
John, talking about who was confirmed, Reince Priebus, the RNC chair. Now that's, you don't get more establishment within the Republican Party than Priebus, right? Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. That's adding another alligator to the swamp, isn't it? Tell me why you would have chosen him.
No, because for one thing, it's the two guys who've been picked, Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus, are the guys who got Trump elected. Priebus runs the RNC. He's run it very efficiently and well, so he's a natural choice to be chief of staff. And I don't think it has anything to do with the swamp. And it's a complete mischaracterization to talk about him as one of the alligators.
Very finally, David, can President-elect Trump unite the nation from all the evidence thus far with 2 months to go until he's sworn in? Do you have faith? Do you hope that he can unite the nation, David?
I have absolutely no hope that Trump will be able to unite the nation based on the policies that he promised to usher in throughout the campaign, and given the fact that we have an absolute belief that he's going to follow through on those policies, very harmful policies that are designed to divide people. I don't think that there's any chance at all for Donald Trump to unite people. I think that it's going to be a big disaster, and he can perhaps say some things to help calm fears, but I don't think it's going to work.
Okay, this is what I'm going to try and do. Let's give him maybe 6 months, and then I'm going to invite both you gentlemen back onto the show, and then we can take stock. We can see how he did, and we'll see if, David, if your fears have been materialized, and if, John, your optimism can be borne out. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, South Korea's president under pressure as prosecutors investigate her advisor. And in Picture This, the social media speculation over what's in store for Donald Trump at the White House. South Korea's parliament has passed a bill allowing a special prosecutor to investigate a key ally of President Park. As part of the case, Park will undergo questioning. The first time a sitting president will be doing so in South Korea. It will add to the pressure on her to step down following massive protests in the capital, Seoul. The Newsmakers' Natalie Pohernan reports.
President Park Geun-hye is facing a rising sea of popular anger. For the past 3 weeks, South Koreans have been staging protests demanding her resignation. But that call for change is blowing in the wind. The protests stem from a scandal involving Park's friend Choi Soon-sil, an unelected individual with ties to a religious cult who was giving the president political advice. Choi has been charged with abuse of power and fraud, including a charge that she pressured big businesses like Samsung to donate about $68 million to 2 foundations she controlled. Park has apologised twice to the nation. And she'll be the first sitting president to be questioned by prosecutors over a criminal investigation. She has not been charged herself. But for protesters, that is not enough. They want a change from the politics as usual in South Korea, which enabled someone to use their personal network to gain access to the highest office in the land and the influence that wields. About 60% of South Koreans think their society is corrupt. The Park Choi scandal comes at a time when South Koreans in lower-level positions are being made to change the way they do business. It's part of the government's move to root out corruption. A new anti-graft law called the Kim Yong-run Act came into effect in September. It means civil servants, lawmakers, journalists and some teachers can't accept meals worth more than $25. They're also barred from accepting any gift worth more than $42 if there's a conflict of interest. The punishment ranges from fines to up to 3 years in prison. Park Park Geun-hye campaigned on a political philosophy of principles and trust. But many South Koreans are asking if the president is now fit to represent those values in her remaining year in office. Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Don Kirk joins me now from Seoul. He's an author and journalist who's covered the Korean Peninsula among many other assignments for more than 40 years. Thank you very much for joining us, Don. Is there anyone left to support the president, given her approval ratings are at 5% as we speak?
There's no doubt a hard core of supporters for the president, conservatives who don't like the idea of leftists or moderates upsetting the government. Sure, there are people left. However, aside from leftists and progressives and radicals and so forth, there are an awful lot of conservatives who also think that she should step down or that she should be impeached. So she doesn't have a lot of support. Of course, she still has some support.
So looking at Choi Soon-sil, whose foundation made tens of millions of dollars through her connections to the president, she seems to be very influential, seems to have heavily influenced the president and is connected to a religious cult. Help me understand the mindset a little bit here, because when I was reading about this, it seemed to be almost like the way Russians all those years ago saw the influence of Rasputin over the Tsarina. It's like there's this foreign force over our government. Is that an accurate analogy?
Well, there has been that analogy. We've heard that word Rasputin quite a lot, actually. The analogy is to the spiritual influence that was exercised by Rasputin, and some believe, in fact, most people believe, was exercised by Choi Soon-sil. She apparently is said to have engaged in shamanistic rituals with President Park. She's the daughter of a confidant of President Park's father, Park Geun-hye, who was president until he was assassinated in 1979. That confidant had a Church of Eternal Grace, which was kind of a multi-religious church reflecting Buddhist, Christian, shaman influences. And the daughter apparently carried on and has inveigled her way, it's said, into the confidence of President Park. So there's where you get the Rasputin comparison.
Right. Is there any way the government can sort of have legitimacy that it's cracking down on corruption and that the people should trust the government while they crack down on corruption, while at the same time the president is embroiled in a corruption scandal?
Well, the corruption investigation is extremely interesting. All kinds of stuff keeps coming up. She was going to some beauty parlor facelifting place somewhere, which was giving her all these treatments free of charge under a different name, said to have been arranged by Choi Soon-sil. That's just one story that I saw today. And new stuff is coming out all the time. So perhaps we're going to learn a great deal. I think this scandal is really going to undermine her, but she could survive. I'm not saying she's going to step down. She could survive as sort of a figurehead while appointing a prime minister who really takes charge of the government. She has a prime minister. The government has a prime minister who presides over cabinet meetings, but is actually not a powerful figure. Well, the prime minister, a new prime minister perhaps, could exert more power. She could remain in office until the end of her term, which is, there's an election coming up in December of next year. So, she may try to ride it out. That's one scenario. There are other scenarios as well.
Yeah, interesting to see if she does try to ride it out and the protests intensify. We'll be keeping a close eye on the story. Don, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. In today's picture, Barack Obama and his vice president, Joe Biden, are approaching the end of their time together at the White House. And as that gets closer, social media users are imagining how they're spending their last days in office. Let's take a look. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.